the Harmattan season when humidity is very low. Stop hunting for bushmeat with fire. Avoid palm wine tapping with fire in the dry season. Stop slash and burning without creating fire belts. Stop cooking on the farm without extinguishing the fire after cooking. Drivers and passengers must stop dropping lighted cigarette butts whilst driving. What you need to do: create fire belts before burning. Ensure that the firefighters, fire volunteers or forestry guards are present before burning. Practice early burning before the Harmattan season. To save my life, your life, and our environment, please stop bushfires now.
Are you ready to learn the essentials of fire safety? Introducing our general fire safety educational program designed to equip individuals of all ages to prevent, respond, and to stay safe in the event of fire. Our program covers a wide range of fire safety topics, including fire prevention, emergency preparedness, and the proper use of fire safety equipment. But we don't stop at theory. We believe in hands-on learning, which is why we organize practical drills and exercises to simulate real-life scenarios. We also engage with the community through interactive events where participants can explore fire safety booths, interact with fire officers, and learn about fire prevention measures. Remember, fire safety is everyone's responsibility. Let's come together and create a community that is well prepared and protected from the dangers of fire.
You are welcome to this day's episode, Time with the Counsellor. We have discussed issues bordered on the killers of our time. And today we are beginning a new series altogether, or episode. We will be identifying another critical, destructive emotion that is doing a lot of damage to people in life, general, in the place of work, and what have you. And that is anxiety. I believe a lot of us have heard about anxiety. And we know what anxiety, or we have heard about the word anxiety. But sometimes it's so difficult or to understand actually what constitutes anxiety. So in this episode, you'll just look at anxiety, what it is. You look at the positive or healthy and unhealthy dimensions of anxiety. Look at types of anxiety disorders. Now, in the area of anxiety disorders, we will be looking at social phobia. You will look at panic disorder. You will look at obsessive compulsive disorder. You will also look at issues around traumatic stress disorders. As I said, we will be discussing anxiety disorders and look at about 4 types of them. As I promise you, it's going to be interesting because a lot of things happen to us and we attribute to a lot of things. So just stay on He will be back very soon.
Bushfire is so burning. Bushfire is the worst enemy of our forest, farmland, and the economy. You know, bushfire destroys Ghana's forest cover and vegetation at an annual rate of 75,000 hectares, and about 3% of Ghana's GDP is lost through the menace of bushfire every year. The livelihood of victims of bushfire is worrisome and very challenging. The only way that we can stop our worst enemy, especially during the Harmattan season, is to stop indiscriminate burning of the bush in the Harmattan season when humidity is very low. Stop hunting for bush meat with fire. Avoid palm wine tapping with fire in the dry season. Stop slash and burning without creating fire belts. Stop cooking on the farm without extinguishing the fire after cooking. Drivers and passengers must stop dropping lighted cigarette butts whilst driving. What you need to do: create fire belts before burning. Ensure that the firefighters, fire volunteers, or forestry guards are present before burning. Practice early burning before the Harmattan season. To save my life, your life, and our environment, please stop bushfires now.
You're welcome back to Time with the Counsellor. My name is Reverend Ike Zwami here, the Chaplain General of Ghana National Fire Service, and also officer in charge of the counseling department of Ghana National Fire Service. I promise we are going to talk about anxiety. Now, what you've been hearing anxiety. What do you know about anxiety? Anxiety, of course, is very common. It's a household name. That someone, so I'm feeling anxiety or I'm anxious. Yes. Anxiety is about one's state. You feel a point in time, you feel apprehensive, you feel worried, and you feel some kind of uneasiness in your system. That sometimes causes you to perspire, you'll be sweating, and even some people, even when they are going through that anxious moment, they quickly even visit the loo. They can develop a stomach upset with as that situation is raging on. But you know, anxiety is just about you worrying about something that sometimes you may even don't know why you are feeling that way. But take note that anxiety involves tensions within physical tension, uneasiness and apprehension. But you sometimes may not be able to explain why that situation is there. Anxiety in itself is not bad. Without anxiety, you will not be able to function well in some situations. So what we are going to concern ourselves with is trying to understand what the unhealthy anxiety is all about. Now, anxiety, as I said, can be divided into healthy and unhealthy. The healthy one means that it's so important. For example, you have an assignment or you have an engagement. The thought comes to you that hey, I'm likely to fail. Then you feel that kind of tension within. And that tension within helps you to perform better. And that is what we can say that anxiety is healthy. It causes one to be conscious It actually puts you to be in control of the situation and even help you to come out of dangerous situation. So healthy anxiety involves caution and vigilance. And as a result of that, you are able to ward off harmful situation. So for example, all of a sudden, you see danger, then you jump to safety. Or you anticipate that, hey, if I'm not careful, this is my examination, I'll fail. And the fact that that consciousness has dawned on you, you sit up to study, or you are going for a program. So if I don't prepare well, I'm likely to fail. That is the positive side of anxiety. Now, the other negative side of anxiety is what we are going to delve into and make sure that we are able to take care of them. In a situation where the unhealthy anxiety looms over us, in that situation, the individuals feel panic, terror and horror, trembling, choking, and sometimes numbness. And this many a time creates tension to the point that we become dysfunctional or unproductive in our workplace. But the issue here is that anxiety for a moment is not bad. But when it becomes a regular feature of one's life, where one, to the point that one feels terror when there's no danger at hand, one feels apprehensive when there's nothing actually to cause that individual to be apprehensive. You can give testimony to people when they get to places where there's nothing showing that there's danger, but the mind is still telling them that they are in a place of danger. And that is what we are going to concern ourselves with and deal with them. You know, this kind of the negative or unhealthy anxiety sometimes disorganizes to the point that it weakens our coping mechanism, and over time it destroys the faculty in our brain that help us to prepare us to run away from danger. So we are going to basically concern ourselves with the anxiety disorders, types of anxieties that create problems that cause us not to be able to function as it should. We will do ourselves a lot of good to understand this anxiety well, the healthy anxiety well, when we are able to distinguish between anxiety from fear, stress, and panic. We have dealt with stress, but we'll talk about it also briefly so that you know where on the spectrum or on a continuum, where does anxiety begin and end? Where does fear also come in? And when does stress also come in? Where does panic also come in? All these operate on the negative emotions. They are negative emotions when they become chronic in nature. Now, I said anxiety is about apprehension and intense uneasiness that we feel or an individual feels when actually there's no danger. That's anxiety. Fear, on the other hand, is an immediate alarm reaction to danger or life-threatening emergencies. So fear, you see that there is harm, there's something, the imminent danger, and that the body prepares you to be able to run faster or freeze. So it's fight, flight, or fight or freeze. Fear, you see something that is imminent danger. But in the case of anxiety, there's nothing there. But individuals still receive alarm that run away. But meanwhile, there's no this thing. But in the case of fear, imminent danger, you are seeing something. And as a result of that, your body prepares you to run or fight or freeze. The panic, on the other hand, is sudden, overwhelming terror. Sudden. You are just walking and all of a sudden you feel crash. And even sometimes people can pass on when they come under intense panic. Stress, on the other hand, is also about one's mental appraisal of events that tell the individual that I don't have the resources to deal with it. And either I have to run away, I have to fight, I have to freeze. So the anxiety, stress, fear, panic, all operates around negative emotions. But none of these, in exception of panic, are negative on their own, on itself. But when they prolong for a long time, or individual goes through such destructive emotion for a long time, that individual can become dysfunctional. And that is why we must avert our minds to this spectrum of negative emotions. We would now look at statistics. This anxiety issue, is it a figment of one's imagination, or is something that are affecting people in our lives? In this part of our world, there's difficulty in coming across statistics or data about how many people in a given country are being affected by anxiety disorders. In a research work conducted by Dimler, that's 2005, she found out that about 35 million people suffer from anxiety disorders in the US, form of anxiety disorder. So we can pick about 12.1% of the population. So for example, if you take about 10 people or 100 people, about 12, if you take 100 people, 12 people may be suffering from anxiety disorders, one form or the other. That is why we must pay critical attention to this anxiety disorder. Because let's look at, for example, in those days, especially when we are young people in secondary schools, when we are given assignments to go and speak, to perform a role, I remember very well that the intense anxiety that we expose. Some people have to go in for recreational drugs. Either he's going to take certain medication I wouldn't like to mention on this platform, to be able to get them that boldness to be able to meet the crowd. Now, for over time, people who are not able to overcome the associated anxiety with public speaking and others, many a time become drug addicts and fell off and become unproductive in a place of work. So basically, to this point, we are saying that anxiety, especially the negative anxiety or the unhealthy anxiety, where people feel unnecessary apprehensive at performing a given task, is so counterproductive and destroying a lot of people. Go nowhere. We are taking a break. We will come back and pick it from there.
Bushfire, it's so burning now.
Bushfire is the worst enemy of our forest, farmland, and the economy. You know, bushfire destroys Ghana's forest cover and vegetation at an annual rate of 75,000 hectares, and about 3% of Ghana's GDP is lost through the menace of bushfire every year. The livelihood of victims of bushfire is worrisome and very challenging. The only way that we can stop our worst enemy, especially during the Harmattan season, is to stop indiscriminate burning of the bush in the Harmattan season when humidity is very low. Stop hunting for bush meat with fire. Avoid palm wine tapping with fire in the dry season. Stop slash and burning without creating fire belts. Stop cooking on the farm without extinguishing the fire after cooking. Drivers and passengers must stop dropping lighted cigarette butts whilst driving. What you need to do: create fire belts before burning. Ensure that the firefighters, fire volunteers, or forestry guards are present before burning. Practice early burning before the Harmattan season. To save my life, your life, and our environment, please stop bushfires now.
You are welcome back to Time with the Counselor, Reverend DO2 IK Ezwa Amihi. We were talking about anxiety, and I said anxiety has caused a lot of damage to a lot of people. So I was sharing with us some of the statistics, especially on the generalized anxiety disorders. Counsellor also did the research, and others who did the research, that says us that when you take about 100 people, 5 of them is likely to suffer from generalized anxiety disorders. And this to tell us that emotional, destructive emotion, even though subterranean in nature, can cause monumental damage to individual health-wise, and also cause an individual to be unproductive in the field of work. So as fire service station and as the counseling department of the service, we attach so much importance in identifying what will send out to our grave earlier than what our Maker planned for us. Now we'll be looking at anxiety, the anatomy of the anxiety. When I say anatomy of the anxiety, basically we should be able to understand how the anxiety flows from the brain of the human being. See, the brain is so designed to the point that each cortex has its function. But when we are talking about anxiety, there are 3 parts of the brain that we cannot leave out. One is the frontal cortex. The frontal cortex of the brain is responsible for thought, reasoning, and logic. That part of it. The other part is the hippocampus. It's also responsible for memory and learning. So when you do something and you have unpleasant situation, the hippocampus now will take notice of that unpleasant feeling that you had. And this unpleasant feeling is now stored. So anytime you are getting to a place and that same thing is there or pops up, now the mind will tell you that you must tread cautiously. There's danger ahead. So it will help you to be able to run from danger. It helps you to be able to live a life that will take you away from a lot of danger. Now the other part that is so critical is amygdala. The amygdala is like almond shape. So it takes its root from the Greek word almond. So amygdala. It is responsible for informing the individual so fast. So rather, the amygdala's work is that it doesn't, when your senses peak, something that has the tendency to affect you, to endanger your life, it doesn't, the information pass through your eye, through your ears, even the nose, the sense. It doesn't go through the brain, the cortices, where logic, reasoning, and all that takes place. And that is why you can be able to run away from danger by moments, fleet of moments. Now, if we were to pass through the frontal cortex, it will now be reasoning. What is the color of the car? Can this car kill me? Can this car do this? So you delay. But the amygdala will easily prompt you that no, there's danger. So jump, and you jump. Now, this mechanism is put in place, and it can be anxiety of highest order can disable the amygdala, the hippocampus, and what will happen is that where you need not to be afraid, you'll be afraid. So in a situation where one is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, that individual's amygdala is tempered with, and therefore alarm, instead of the alarm to stop, so it keeps giving the alarm, keep giving the alarm, so the individual become anxious, apprehensive, tense all the time. So you see, it is not good that individual plunge him or herself in an anxiety prone situation for a long time, because you will be disabling these mechanisms that help us to survive in the 21st century. I believe that even though these are new terminologies, the frontal cortex, the amygdala, the hippocampus, these points in the brain are responsible for emotions. So as the hippocampus help us to keep memories of traumatic issues, it also take notice of and store informations about things that has given us anxiety in the past. I now know that we have a bit of a school ourselves in what the anatomy of anxiety. Now, another interesting thing we need to take note of as we want to understand these otherwise negative emotion of anxiety is how is these anxiety disorders, what causes anxiety disorders, or things that will cause us to be anxious where there's nothing to be anxious about. What are the causes? In other parlance, you say the etiology of anxiety disorders. Such a construct is not caused by a singular factor. There are a lot of factors that come together to create anxiety disorder in the individual. So we can talk about biological factors, we can talk about psychological factors, we can talk about social factors. But as a minister of the gospel, I've also come to realize that if an individual is spiritually weak, that individual can also be prone to anxiety where there's nothing to worry about. So I have added to the literature spiritual causality of what? Anxiety disorders. Now let's pick them one by one. And looking at the causes. So Courses will also help us that when we are able to look at the various types of anxiety disorders. Now, if you want to address and build resilience against anxiety in our world today, for in our world today, anxiety is very, very common. Don't kid yourself. Anxiety is very, very common. It is found in our churches. It's found in our mosques. It's found in our marketplaces. It's found in our places of work. So let's look at the biological domain. The biological domain tells us that certain individuals have vulnerability, have inherited vulnerabilities. That's the biologic vulnerabilities. And this may be as a result of how that individual's hippocampus or the amygdala functions. And it is your biologically, you have that vulnerability. Let's take note that there are brain circuits and neurotransmitter systems that transacts in the individual to cause the individual to be able to fight or to run away or to freeze. Now, these paths, there are two paths in the biological aspect of it. We have cortex-based anxiety and amygdala-based anxiety. When you say cortex-based anxiety, cortex-based means that either the prefrontal cortex has problem with regards to logic thinking, with regards to rational thinking. So one look at a situation where does not produce any threat, then he's feeling threats in that situation. That's all. There's no lion, there's no wild animal here. The person say, hey, he's feeling anxious. Then biologically, there's something wrong with the brain that is responsible for keeping us whole. You can talk about the amygdala. If the amygdala that inhibits, that stops. Go for example, if all of a sudden a lion or a snake appears, ordinarily you will feel threatened and feel apprehensive and want to run. But when the snake is killed, that amygdala tells you that the snake is killed. Now you can go and sleep. But when the individual's amygdala is no longer functioning, then what will inhibit their alarm, threatening alarm, is also dysfunctional. So individual will always feel what? Apprehensive. So we will come to talk about if we are building resilience or we are trying to therapy for anxiety disorders. You realize that this biological will come with a medical approach. But this aspect also can be corrected by psychotherapy. Now we will look at the other factor that can make one to be prone to anxiety disorders. That's psychological. Now, in one's upbringing, what are some of the things that the individual is exposed to? Is that individual exposed to traumatic events? Then very early on, the individual is conditioned to be anxious and fearful. Listeners, we need to look at the biological, the social aspect. The social aspect that causes one to be prone to anxiety disorder is also stressful environment. For example, where there in part of the world, people that are shootings in the schools. Once the children in the school experience these traumatic scenes, they are always anxious. In some places there are, for example, as we are talking now, there may be the floods in part of the Volta region. is taking homes of people. The social setting now is preparing the people. And anytime some of the individuals even see water from afar, will feel apprehensive. So social settings can prepare individual to become vulnerable in the face of anxiety. Now, the spiritual aspect that I want to conclude with this session is that if an individual has spiritual distortions that renders one's higher power ineffective to guide, protect, and provide, equip and deliver also creates and heightens anxiety. So what is the nature of your God? Is your God a dwarf? Now, if your God cannot provide protection, guidance, that individual can always be apprehensive and anxious in where it's needless to be anxious. Listeners, so far we have looked at causes of what anxiety is all about. We look at the healthy and unhealthy forms of anxiety. When we are saying that anxiety is not bad in itself, but when it is ranging on for a long time, that's what we are concerned with. When it interferes in our relationship, when it interferes in our place of work, that causes us to be unproductive, that causes us to drink, that causes us to do other destructive things, that's what we are concerned with. We also look at the anatomy of anxiety and look at the causes of anxiety: biological, psychological, social, and spiritual. We will meet another time to look at the various types of anxiety. Thank you so much for listening, and may the good Lord be with us. Bye-bye for now.